The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in their assigned seats, their forms as different as the stars themselves. Some looked like giant crystals that sang when they spoke. Others appeared as floating clouds of gas that changed colors with their emotions. A few resembled enormous insects with too many eyes and legs. Ambassador Zethkar stood at his podium, his blue-scaled hands sorting through data tablets. As a member of the Velkari hegemony, he had been chosen to lead today's meeting because his people were known for being careful and thorough. His large yellow eyes scanned the quarterly reports from all corners of the galaxy. "We will now review the monitoring reports from all quarantine zones," Zethkar announced, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. The universal translator made sure every species could understand him perfectly. Most of the assembled beings barely paid attention. Quarantine zone reports were always the same, boring updates about primitive species that were not ready to join galactic society. These reports happened every 3 months and nothing ever changed. Quarantine Zone 1 Beta continues to show no signs of advanced technology, Zethkar read from his tablet. The species there has discovered fire but shows no interest in metal working. A few beings nodded, but most were busy with their own conversations or checking their personal communication devices. Quarantine Zone 3 Gamma reports that the local species has developed basic agriculture but still fights with wooden clubs, he continued. The crystal beings chimed softly among themselves, discussing trade agreements with the Bio Collective. The gas clouds were changing colors rapidly as they argued about mining rights in the Outer Rim territories. Quarantine Zone 7 Alpha shows. Zethkar paused, looking more closely at his tablet. His eye ridges came together in a frown. "This is odd." The report from Zone 7 Alpha was much longer than usual. The automated monitoring systems had detected several unusual energy readings from the third planet of a small yellow star. The locals called their world Earth and themselves humans. Zethkar remembered when the quarantine had been established 200 years ago. The Council's long-range scanners had detected nuclear weapons being used on the planet's surface. The reading showed massive explosions that destroyed entire cities. The Council had immediately classified the humans as a Class 5 destructive species. The classification meant the humans were too violent to contact, too primitive to help, and too dangerous to ignore completely. Standard procedure required a 1,000-year observation period before the species could be considered for contact again. Most Class 5 species either destroyed themselves or learned to control their violent nature during this time. But this report was strange. The monitoring stations were detecting energy signatures that seemed far too advanced for a primitive species. There were readings that looked like controlled fusion reactions, which should have been impossible for beings who had only recently discovered nuclear weapons. "What does it say about the humans?" asked Ambassador Krilth, an insect-like being from the Hive Collective. Her compound eyes glittered with mild curiosity. Zethkar scrolled through the data. The report mentions unusual electromagnetic patterns around their planet. The computers detected what appears to be artificial gravity wells. This caused a few more beings to look up from their private conversations. Artificial gravity technology was considered advanced even by Council standards. Most member species had only mastered it within the last few thousand years. "That cannot be correct," said High Counselor Vextria, a floating gas cloud that currently glowed a skeptical orange color. "Our records clearly show they were using primitive chemical rockets just 50 years ago." Zethkar nodded in agreement. "You are right, of course. The monitoring stations in that sector are very old. They were installed over 300 years ago and probably need maintenance. The readings must be sensor errors." Several beings made sounds of agreement. The Outer Rim monitoring stations were notoriously unreliable. Budget cuts over the past century meant that many systems were operating far beyond their intended lifespan. The report also mentions detecting some kind of quantum distortions. Zethkar continued reading, his voice showing his confusion, and massive energy signatures that appear to be controlled stellar engineering. Now this caused actual laughter to ripple through the assembly. Stellar engineering meant the ability to modify stars themselves, to make them burn brighter or cooler, or even to move them from one location to another. Such technology was purely theoretical even for the most advanced Council species. "Those sensors are definitely malfunctioning," declared Ambassador Mordek, whose rock-like body shook with amusement. A species that was throwing nuclear weapons at each other 2 centuries ago could not possibly develop stellar engineering. They would need at least 10,000 years of peaceful development to reach such levels. Zethkar made a note in his official log to request a maintenance team for the Zone 7 Alpha monitoring stations. Clearly, the equipment was producing false readings. He filed the report in the standard database and marked it for review in 300 years, as required by Council regulations. Moving on to more important matters, Zethkar announced, we have several trade disputes to resolve between the Crystalline Consortium and the Bio Collective. The Assembly's attention immediately focused on this topic. Trade disputes affected everyone and required careful attention. The Crystal Beings and the Biological Collective had been arguing for months about who had rights to harvest rare minerals from newly discovered asteroid fields. As the debate began, the data from Quarantine Zone 7 Alpha was automatically uploaded to the Council's vast archives. Deep in the computer system's artificial intelligence programs noted the unusual readings and flagged them for further analysis. But like most AI recommendations, these flags were buried under thousands of other reports and would probably not be seen by organic beings for decades. Meanwhile, in the outer reaches of the galaxy, the ancient monitoring stations continued their silent watch over the small blue planet. Their sensors detected more unusual activities every day. Massive construction projects in space, energy signatures that matched no known technology, and strange vessels that seemed to bend space around themselves. But the stations had been programmed only to observe and report, not to think or analyze. They faithfully recorded everything they saw and transmitted the data to the Council archives, where it joined millions of other reports that no one had time to read carefully. In the Great Hall, the debate over mining rights grew heated. The Crystal Beings sang angry harmonic progressions while the Bio Collective released pheromones that made the air smell like rotting flowers. Ambassador Zethkar worked hard to keep the discussion peaceful and productive. None of them noticed the small alert that appeared on Zethkar's tablet. The monitoring stations in Zone 7 Alpha had just detected several large objects leaving the planet's gravity well and accelerating to impossible speeds. The objects appeared to be artificial constructs of enormous size, moving in formation toward the edge of their solar system. The alert blinked twice and then disappeared, automatically filed away with all the other sensor errors from the aging monitoring equipment. After all, everyone knew that the humans were primitive beings who had barely learned to leave their planet's atmosphere. The idea that they could build massive spacecraft was obviously ridiculous. The Council continued their important work, governing the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known, confident in their wisdom and completely unaware that everything was about to change. 3 months had passed since the last Council meeting, and Ambassador Zethkar was enjoying a quiet morning in his office when every alarm in the building began screaming at once. The sound was so loud and urgent that his coffee cup fell from his hands and shattered on the floor. Red lights flashed throughout the Council complex as emergency announcements echoed through the corridors. All ambassadors report to the emergency assembly hall immediately. This is not a drill. Unknown vessels have been detected at the edge of Council space. Zethkar's scaled hands trembled as he gathered his official robes and rushed toward the assembly hall. In his 300 years of service to the Council, he had never heard the emergency alarms used for a real crisis. They were tested once per year, but everyone assumed they would never actually be needed. The emergency hall was smaller than the main chamber, but could still hold thousands of beings. As Zethkar entered, he saw that most of the major ambassadors were already present. The air buzzed with worried conversations in dozens of different languages. High Counselor Vextria floated at the center of the hall, her gaseous form glowing a bright red color that indicated extreme alarm. Next to her stood Admiral Crexton, the military commander of Council space. His insect-like body was rigid with tension. "Attention, all members," Vextria's voice boomed through the hall. "At 0347 this morning, our border monitoring stations detected a fleet of unknown vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel at grid coordinates 247 Alpha 9. Massive holographic display appeared above the assembly, showing the edge of Council space. Dozens of red dots marked the positions of the unknown ships. The vessels appeared to be enormous. Each one was at least 10 times larger than the biggest Council warships. The fleet consists of approximately 50 vessels of unknown design and origin, Admiral Crexton reported, his multiple eyes scanning data streams. They do not match any known ship configurations in our database. The technology appears to be advanced. Worried murmurs rippled through the assembly. First contact with unknown species was supposed to be handled carefully through established protocols. Ships were not supposed to appear suddenly at the borders of Council space without any warning. Have they responded to our communication attempts? Asked Ambassador Krilth from the Hive Collective. Admiral Crexton's antenna twitched nervously. Yes, they have. That is part of the problem. The holographic display changed to show a communication log. Audio filled the hall as a clear voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, the official language used by all Council species. Council vessels, this is Admiral Chen of the Terran Federation. We come seeking peaceful dialogue with the representatives of the Galactic Council. We request permission to approach your space and establish formal diplomatic contact. The hall fell completely silent. Every being present understood the terrifying implications of what they had just heard. An unknown species was speaking perfect galactic standard, knew about the Council's existence, and had somehow found their space. This is impossible, whispered Ambassador Mordek, his rock-like form seeming to shrink. No species can learn our language without direct contact. The linguistic patterns are too complex. Sethkar felt his blood turn cold as a horrible realization began to form in his mind. What did they call themselves? He asked, his voice barely audible. The Terran Federation, Admiral Crexton replied. Sethkar's tablet was already in his hands, his claws frantically searching through the quarantine zone databases. Terran. Terra is another name for Earth, the third planet in Quarantine Zone 7 Alpha. The hall erupted in chaos. Beings were shouting, singing, buzzing, and glowing in every color of alarm. The sounds of panic echoed off the walls as the full horror of the situation became clear. The quarantined species? High Counselor Vextria's form flashed between red and purple. The violent primitives with nuclear weapons? That is impossible. They were classified as pre-space flight just 50 years ago. But even as she spoke, more reports were coming in. The unknown vessels, the human vessels, were not just sitting at the border. They were moving with purpose and coordination that suggested advanced tactical knowledge. Long-range scanners were detecting energy signatures that matched no known technology in Council databases. Admiral Chen is requesting a response to his communication, reported the communications officer. He says they have been monitoring our transmissions and are familiar with our diplomatic protocols. This statement sent new waves of fear through the assembly. If the humans had been monitoring Council transmissions, how much did they know about galactic civilization? How long had they been watching? Sethkar was frantically scrolling through old reports from Zone 7 Alpha. The sensor readings that had seemed like equipment errors 3 months ago suddenly looked very different. Artificial gravity wells, quantum distortions, stellar engineering. What if none of it had been sensor malfunction? We need to respond, Admiral Crexton declared. Standard first contact protocols require us to acknowledge their communication within 6 hours. Standard protocols? Ambassador Krilth's compound eyes glittered with fear. Nothing about this situation is standard. How do we establish first contact with a species that was supposed to be quarantined for another 800 years? High Counselor Vexitria had shifted to a deep purple color that indicated deep thought mixed with terror. We must assume they are hostile. Any species that could advance this quickly must be extremely dangerous. They were quarantined because of their violent nature. But their communication was peaceful, pointed out Ambassador Mordek. They asked for permission and mentioned diplomatic contact. That could be a trick, Admiral Crexton said. Many aggressive species use peaceful words before attacking. Sethkar looked up from his tablet, his face pale with shock. According to these reports, our monitoring stations have been detecting unusual activities in their system for over 50 years. We dismissed it all as sensor errors. What kind of activities? Vextria asked. Construction of massive space installations. Energy signatures consistent with matter conversion technology. Gravitational anomalies suggesting the movement of large asteroids and... Sethkar paused, hardly believing what he was reading. Evidence of faster-than-light travel experiments dating back 30 years. The implications were staggering. While the Council had been ignoring the humans and dismissing their activities as sensor glitches, an entire advanced civilization had been developing in their quarantine zone. Not only had the humans achieved spaceflight, they had apparently mastered technologies that even the Council found challenging. We need more information, Vextria declared. Admiral, Prepare our fastest scout ships for a reconnaissance mission to their home system. That will take weeks, Admiral Crexton replied. And they are here now, waiting for an answer. On the holographic display, the human fleet remained in perfect formation at the edge of Council space. They were not advancing or making threatening moves, but their very presence was a threat to everything the Council believed about their place in the galaxy. Send a standard diplomatic response, Vextria finally decided. Acknowledge their communication and request detailed information about their civilization before proceeding with contact. As the communications officer prepared the message, every being in the assembly was thinking the same terrifying thought. If a species that had been quarantined as primitive and violent could achieve such advancement in just 2 centuries, what did that say about the Council's understanding of galactic civilization? How many other primitive species might be more advanced than they appeared? The message was sent and the waiting began. But deep down, everyone knew that the galaxy had just changed forever. The main assembly hall had been transformed into something resembling a war room. Holographic displays showed real-time data from the human fleet, while military advisors whispered urgently with political leaders. Every major species in the galaxy had sent their most important representatives to witness what many believed would be the most significant first contact in galactic history. Ambassador Zethkar sat in his designated seat, but his attention was focused on the massive screen at the front of the hall. Admiral Chen's face looked back at the assembly, surprisingly human-like, with 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth arranged in a pattern similar to several other species. But there was something in his expression that made Zethkar uncomfortable. The human's eyes held intelligence and confidence that seemed far beyond what should be possible for a recently quarantined species. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Admiral Chen began, his voice calm and measured. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation. I speak for humanity and our allied species in requesting formal recognition and diplomatic relations with your organization. High Counselor Vextria glowed a cautious yellow as she responded. Admiral Chen, our records indicate that your species was classified as pre-spaceflight as recently as 50 years ago. Can you explain how you achieved such rapid technological advancement? Admiral Chen smiled, and something about that expression sent chills through the assembled beings. Counselor, I believe your records may be incomplete. Humanity has been aware of the galactic community for over 100 years. The hall fell silent. This was worse than anyone had imagined. We first detected your monitoring stations in our system in 2387. Chen continued. Our scientists studied them carefully and learned to decode your communication protocols. We have been listening to Council transmissions and learning about galactic civilization ever since. Ambassador Krilth leaned forward, her compound eyes reflecting the light from the display screens. If you have been aware of us for so long, why did you not attempt contact earlier? Because we were not ready, Chen replied simply. Your monitoring stations and communication intercepts made it clear that the Council considered us a dangerous, primitive species. We decided to use our quarantine period productively. Admiral Crexton's antennae twitched nervously. What do you mean by productively? Chen gestured, and the holographic display changed to show images that made every being in the assembly gasp in shock. The images showed massive space installations orbiting Earth, structures that dwarfed anything in Council space. Cities floating in the void connected by streams of light that pulsed with energy. While the Council believed us to be primitive, we were building, Chen explained. We constructed orbital habitats for 50 billion people. We developed clean fusion power that could provide unlimited energy. We created artificial intelligence systems that could design new technologies faster than biological minds. The next image showed Earth itself, but it was not the same planet that had been in the quarantine zone files. The continents were green and lush, the oceans crystal clear. Massive towers stretched from the surface to orbit, connected by bridges of light. We healed our world, Chen said quietly. The nuclear devastation that led to our quarantine was reversed. We cleaned the radiation, replanted the forests, and restored the atmosphere. Earth is now more beautiful than it has been in thousands of years. Ambassador Mordek's rocky form seemed to crumble slightly. How is this possible? The technology required for planetary restoration should take millennia to develop. You are correct for most species, Chen agreed, but you may have misunderstood something fundamental about humanity. You saw our wars and violence as a sign of primitiveness. We saw them as a drive to innovate. The display changed again, showing historical images of human conflicts. But Chen's narration gave them a different meaning than the Council had assumed. Every war taught us new lessons about material science, engineering, logistics, and organization. Every conflict drove us to develop better tools, faster communication, more efficient production methods. What you saw as destructive chaos, we used as a laboratory for rapid advancement. High Counselor Vexitria's form flickered between colors as she struggled to process this information. But surely such constant conflict would prevent peaceful development of science and culture. Not at all, Chen replied. We learned to channel our competitive nature constructively. Instead of fighting each other, we began competing to solve problems. Nations raced to develop clean energy, to cure diseases, to explore space. The same drive that once led to war began driving unprecedented cooperation and innovation. The next series of images showed human achievements that made the Council's most advanced technologies look primitive by comparison. Starships that could travel between galaxies in days rather than years. Medical technology that could regrow entire limbs or even transfer consciousness between bodies. Terraforming equipment that could transform dead worlds into garden paradises in mere decades. This is impossible, whispered Ambassador Krillith. These technologies are theoretical even for our most advanced species. Perhaps that is because your species achieved comfort too early, Chen suggested gently. When the Council species developed faster than light travel and joined galactic civilization, you stopped pushing boundaries. You became content with incremental improvements rather than revolutionary breakthroughs. The truth of this statement hit the Assembly like a physical blow. For thousands of years, Council species had been refining existing technologies, rather than developing new ones. They had become comfortable with their place in the galaxy and stopped striving for more. Humanity never had that luxury, Chen continued. Isolated and quarantined, we had to solve our own problems. We could not rely on established galactic technologies or trade with other species. Every challenge forced us to innovate from scratch. Admiral Crexton's military training made him focus on the implications for galactic security. What are your intentions now that you have achieved such advancement? Do you plan to expand aggressively into Council space? Chen's expression grew serious. Admiral, humanity has spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment. We have studied your civilization carefully and learned from both your successes and your failures. We have no desire for conquest or domination. Then what do you want? Asked High Counselor Vextria. We want to help, Chen replied simply. Our monitoring of Council communications has shown us many problems that we believe we can solve. Dying worlds that could be restored, diseases that could be cured, species facing extinction that could be saved, technologies that could benefit everyone. The offer should have been welcome news, but somehow it made the assembled beings even more uncomfortable. The idea that the primitive humans could solve problems that had challenged the Council for millennia was deeply unsettling. We have brought gifts to demonstrate our intentions, Chen announced. The display showed new images. Human medical teams working on plague-stricken worlds. Human engineers helping dying civilizations repair their damaged ecosystems. Human scientists sharing advanced technologies with struggling colonies. These activities are already underway, Ambassador Mordek asked, his voice filled with shock. Yes, Chen confirmed. We have been quietly providing assistance to species in need for the past 5 years. We did not want to wait for official permission when beings were suffering. The implications were staggering. Not only had humanity surpassed Council technology, they had been operating throughout galactic space without detection. They had been helping other species while the Council was unaware of their existence. As the presentation ended, every being in the assembly was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The species they had dismissed as violent and primitive had become the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. And rather than seeking revenge for their quarantine, the humans were offering to share their knowledge and help solve galactic problems. The age of human isolation was over, and nothing would ever be the same. 1 year after first contact, the Galactic Council's Great Assembly Hall was nearly empty. Where thousands of beings once gathered to govern the galaxy, now only a few hundred remained. The massive chamber felt hollow and cold, its empty seats a stark reminder of how much had changed. Ambassador Zethkar stood at his podium for what he knew would be the last time. His scaled hands held a simple document, the official dissolution order for the Galactic Council. After 3,000 years of governing galactic civilization, the organization that had once seemed eternal was finally ending. High Counselor Vexitria floated beside him, her gaseous form a dim gray that reflected the somber mood of the occasion. The few remaining ambassadors sat in scattered groups throughout the vast hall, their conversations quiet and subdued. "The final vote has been recorded," Zethkar announced, his voice echoing in the mostly empty space. "With only 37 member species remaining, the Galactic Council no longer has the support necessary to function as a governing body." The last year had been a cascade of departures, as species after species chose to join the Terran Federation's cooperative instead of remaining with the Council. The humans had never demanded that anyone leave the Council. They had simply offered better solutions to problems and let species make their own choices. Admiral Chen had kept her promise to address the Council one final time. Her image appeared on the holographic display, speaking from the bridge of her flagship somewhere in the outer galaxy. "Honored former counselors," Chen began, her voice carrying genuine respect, despite the Council's reduced circumstances. "I want to thank you for your service to galactic civilization. For 3,000 years you maintained peace and order among countless species. That achievement should not be forgotten." Her words were gracious, but they could not hide the fundamental truth. The Council had become obsolete, not through any failure of character, but through simple inability to adapt to a changing galaxy. "The Terran Federation's cooperative is not a replacement for your organization," Chen continued. "It is an evolution. We have learned from your successes and your limitations. Where you governed through authority and tradition, we coordinate through shared knowledge and mutual benefit." Zethkar reflected on how different the two organizations truly were. The Council had been built on the idea that advanced species should guide and control less developed ones. The Federation was built on the idea that every species had something valuable to contribute, regardless of their technological level. "We invite any remaining Council species to join our cooperative," Chen said, "not as subjects or junior members, but as equal partners in the exploration of knowledge and the improvement of life throughout the galaxy." The invitation was generous, but Zethkar knew that few of the remaining species would accept it immediately. Pride was a powerful force, and admitting that their former quarantine subjects had become their superiors was difficult for many beings to accept. Admiral Crexton, one of the few military officers still loyal to the Council, stepped forward. "Admiral Chen, what assurance can you give that humanity will not abuse its position of power as the Council sometimes did?" Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "Admiral, I cannot give you absolute assurance because absolute power corrupts absolutely, as one of our philosophers once said. But I can tell you that humanity has learned from our own dark history and from observing galactic civilization." The display changed to show images of human activities throughout the galaxy. Scientists working alongside alien researchers, engineers teaching advanced technologies to anyone who wanted to learn, medical teams treating patients from dozens of different species. "We share our knowledge freely because we have learned that diversity of thought leads to better solutions," Chen explained. "We do not seek to control other species because we have learned that cooperation produces better results than domination." Ambassador Krilth, whose Hive Collective had been among the first to leave the Council, spoke from her new position as a Federation coordinator. "The humans have kept every promise they made. They ask for nothing except the opportunity to learn and to help others learn." Her words carried weight because the Hive Collective was known for their careful evaluation of political situations. If they trusted the humans, many other species would as well. "What about the future?" asked Ambassador Mordek, his rocky form showing signs of age and weariness. "What happens when humanity grows tired of cooperation and decides to rule directly?" Chen smiled sadly. "Ambassador, humanity is already moving beyond this galaxy. Our exploration fleets have discovered new galaxies with new challenges and new opportunities for growth. We are too restless to become comfortable rulers." This revelation sent a ripple of surprise through the assembly. The humans were not content to dominate one galaxy. They were already reaching for new frontiers beyond anything the Council had ever imagined. "The Federation will continue with or without human leadership," Chen continued. "We have built it to be self-sustaining, based on principles of cooperation and shared knowledge, rather than dependence on any single species. Zethkar realized that this was perhaps the humans' greatest achievement. They had not simply replaced the council with a new form of government, they had created something that could evolve and adapt as circumstances changed. "I have one final report to present," Zethkar announced, opening his tablet to display data that still amazed him. Federation worlds now report the highest quality of life indices in galactic history. Disease rates have dropped by 90%. Environmental damage has been reversed on hundreds of worlds. Educational opportunities have expanded to include every sentient species. The numbers told the story more clearly than any political speech could. The human approach of sharing advanced technology freely and focusing on practical problem-solving had produced results that the Council's careful regulations and gradual improvements had never achieved. Moreover, Zethkar continued, the rate of technological innovation throughout the galaxy has increased by over 300% since the Federation was established. When knowledge is shared freely rather than controlled by bureaucracy, every species benefits. High Counselor Vexitria glowed a soft blue as she prepared to speak her final words as a council leader. Perhaps our greatest mistake was believing that wisdom came with age and that newer species had little to teach us. The humans have shown us that fresh perspectives and different approaches can solve problems that seem impossible. She paused, looking around the nearly empty hall. We spent 3,000 years maintaining the status quo. The humans spent 200 years revolutionizing everything. As the formal dissolution ceremony concluded, Zethkar felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The Council had served its purpose for thousands of years, but its time had passed. The galaxy needed something new, something better adapted to the realities of rapid technological change and diverse species cooperation. The Galactic Council is hereby dissolved, Zethkar announced formally. Long live the Terran Federation Cooperative. As the remaining beings filed out of the Great Hall, many of them were already carrying applications to join the Federation. Pride was important, but practical benefits mattered more. The humans had proven that their way worked better. Later that day, Zethkar stood in his empty office, packing his personal belongings into storage containers. Through his window, he could see human ships moving through what had once been the heart of Council space. They moved with purpose and confidence, carrying researchers and engineers to new projects throughout the galaxy. On his desk lay an invitation from Admiral Chen herself, an offer to join a human exploration mission to the Andromeda Galaxy. The humans wanted his experience and knowledge as they prepared to expand beyond their home galaxy entirely. Zethkar looked at the invitation for a long time. He had spent his entire career believing that his species was among the most advanced in the galaxy. The humans had shown him that advancement was not about age or tradition, but about the willingness to keep learning and growing. He picked up the invitation and activated his communicator. Admiral Chen, this is Ambassador Zethkar. I accept your offer. As he spoke, he realized that the end of the Council was not really an ending at all. It was the beginning of something much larger and more ambitious than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The quarantined species had become the galaxy's greatest hope, and they were just getting started. 6 months after first contact, Ambassador Zethkar stood in his office staring out at a galaxy that no longer made sense. His desk was covered with reports that all told the same impossible story. Human ships were appearing everywhere, and wherever they went, they were solving problems that the Council had declared unsolvable. The morning briefing from Admiral Crexton lay open on his tablet. The Crystalline Consortium's home system, which had been slowly dying for 300 years as their star cooled, was now burning bright and healthy again. Human stellar engineers had somehow rekindled the star's fusion reactions without causing dangerous instabilities. On the outer rim, the plague that had been killing the Bio-Collective for centuries was gone. Human medical teams had arrived with treatments that not only cured the disease, but strengthened the species' natural immunity against future infections. The Bio-Collective's population was now growing faster than it had in millennia. Most disturbing of all was the report from the Hive Collective's mining colonies. These worlds had been stripped bare of resources decades ago and abandoned as useless rocks. Human terraforming teams had arrived and were transforming them into lush garden worlds, capable of supporting billions of beings. Zethkar's scaled hands trembled as he scrolled through more reports. Every single human intervention had been successful. Not one failure, not one mistake, not one disaster. It was as if the humans understood galactic problems better than the species who had been living with them for thousands of years. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Zethkar's aide, a young Velkari named Kethmar, appeared on his communication screen looking worried. "Ambassador, you need to see the latest council voting results," Kethmar said. "The situation is becoming critical." Zethkar opened the voting database and felt his heart sink. 3 more council member species had formally voted to withdraw from the organization this week. The Crystalline Consortium, grateful for their restored star, had voted to establish independent trade relations with the Terran Federation. The Bio Collective had followed suit after their plague was cured. Even the typically cautious Shell people had begun preliminary discussions about leaving the council. In total, 47 of the council's 130 member species had either left or were considering leaving. They all gave the same reason. The Terran Federation offered better solutions to their problems than the council ever had. "What about the loyalty protocols?" Zethkar asked. "Surely the species understand their obligations to the council?" Kethmar's expression grew more worried. "Sir, that is part of the problem. The humans are not demanding that species choose between the council and the Federation. They are offering cooperation to anyone who wants it, regardless of political affiliation." This made the situation even worse. If the humans had demanded exclusive loyalty, the council could have painted them as aggressive invaders trying to destroy galactic civilization. But their willingness to help everyone, even species that remained loyal to the council, made them look generous and peaceful while making the council look petty and jealous. Zethkar's door chimed, and High Counselor Vexitria entered without waiting for permission. Her gaseous form was glowing a deep blue color that indicated profound sadness mixed with resignation. "Zethkar, we need to discuss the council's response to the human situation," she said, settling into a chair designed for her species. "What response can we make?" Zethkar replied bitterly. "They are not attacking us. They are not threatening us. They are not even trying to recruit our member species. They are simply better than us." Vextria's glow shifted to purple. "The preliminary reports from our science teams have confirmed what we feared. Human technology is not just advanced, it represents fundamental breakthroughs that our scientists say should be impossible." She activated a holographic display that showed complex scientific data. Their fusion reactors produce energy without any radioactive waste. Their medical nanobots can repair genetic damage at the cellular level. Their terraforming technology can create stable ecosystems in decades instead of millennia. "How?" Zethkar asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "Our scientists believe it is because the humans approached each problem from first principles rather than building on existing technologies," Vextria explained. "When they needed clean energy, they did not try to improve fusion reactors. They reinvented fusion itself. When they needed faster healing, they did not improve surgical techniques. They created entirely new forms of medicine." The holographic display changed to show comparative timelines of technological development. Council species had achieved basic spaceflight and then spent thousands of years making incremental improvements. Humans had achieved spaceflight and then immediately began developing revolutionary new approaches to every problem they encountered. The quarantine may have been the best thing that ever happened to them, Vextria admitted reluctantly. Without access to our technologies, they had to innovate constantly. Without our established scientific theories limiting their thinking, they could explore possibilities that we had declared impossible. A new message alert appeared on Zethkar's tablet. This one was from Ambassador Krilth of the Hive Collective. Her species had been among the most loyal council members for over 2,000 years. "Zethkar," Krilth's recorded message began, "I am sending this to inform you that the Hive Collective will be voting to leave the council next week. The human terraforming of our dead worlds has restored hope to our species. We cannot ignore the practical benefits of Federation membership." Zethkar turned off the message and looked at Vexitria. "How many more will we lose?" "Our political analysts believe we could lose half our membership within the next year," Vextria replied. "The humans are not actively recruiting, but their reputation for solving problems is spreading throughout the galaxy. The truly frustrating thing was that the humans seemed genuinely committed to peaceful cooperation. They had not made any demands on species that joined them. They had not attempted to impose their political systems or cultural values. They simply offered technological assistance and asked for nothing in return except the opportunity to study new scientific problems. "There is something else," Vextria said, her glow shifting to a worried orange. "Our intelligence services have detected human exploration fleets moving beyond the galaxy's edge." This news hit Zethkar like a physical blow. "They are leaving?" "Not leaving, expanding. They appear to be searching for new galaxies to explore and new challenges to solve. Our analysts believe that this galaxy may no longer provide sufficient stimulation for their scientific curiosity." The implications were terrifying. Humanity had surpassed galactic civilization so completely that they were now looking beyond the galaxy itself for new frontiers. They had treated the Council's quarantine as a temporary inconvenience and the galaxy as a stepping stone to greater things. "What can we do?" Zethkar asked. Vextria's form flickered between several colors before settling on a resigned gray. "We can adapt or become irrelevant. The humans have shown us that our understanding of what is possible was far too limited. We can try to learn from them, or we can watch our civilization slowly crumble as more species choose Federation cooperation over Council bureaucracy." As if summoned by their conversation, another message arrived. This one was from Admiral Chen herself, addressed to the entire Council leadership. "Honored Councilors," the message began, "the Terran Federation extends an invitation to join our cooperative research initiative. We believe that the combined knowledge and perspectives of all galactic species could lead to discoveries that benefit everyone. We do not ask you to abandon your political structure, only to consider collaboration in the pursuit of knowledge and the betterment of all sentient life." Zethkar and Vextria looked at each other in silence. The humans were offering them a way to remain relevant, but it would require admitting that their former quarantine subjects had become their superiors. It would mean accepting that the Council's age of dominance was over. Outside Zethkar's window, human ships could be seen moving through Council space with casual confidence. They were no longer the quarantined primitives hiding in a distant spiral arm. They had become the new leaders of galactic civilization, and they had achieved it not through conquest or intimidation, but by simply being better at solving problems than anyone else. The galaxy would never be the same.